2019 is a pretty significant year for not just Europe. I think it's a significant year in terms of the European election, but what message these elections are gonna put out there. It's kind of almost the elections, the European elections this year are gonna be kind of like a seal to the story of the after Trump, the after Brexit. And it's kind of like almost like, ooh, what's gonna follow? And if these elections this year are gonna go in the same kind of space and the same flow, that would validate where we're going as internationally, but as the West in general. Where is the Western world going, and is it following a certain flow? Now, a lot of the stories and the reasons, and people kind of think about it in different ways, but I think as an anti-racist movement, and in ENAR and our members in particular, there are very real fears. And there are things that it's not as if we didn't see that coming, or we didn't see the rise of the far right, or all these kind of threats that we have been dealing with for a very long time. And racism hasn't appeared suddenly with the rise of the far right in Europe. It always has been, and we're talking about communities that have been facing this issue for centuries, including colonization. So we're not new to violence, we're not new to hate, we're not new to polarized conversations. However, it is about us deciding what kind of movement we want to be and what kind of response do we want to give. And I think, me personally, that's a very personal point of view and reflection that I've been on in the last while in terms of my own journey, has been that I don't want to do an anti-racism that actually means that I have to face up to racists and explain to them why racism is bad. I don't want to do an anti-racism where I have to justify my humanity. I don't want to do an anti-racism where we have to say, you know, like, I'm Muslim, hey, as a Muslim, you know, I breathe air too, so maybe you should tolerate me and let me live. I'm sick of that kind of response. And I think for me, and my anti-racism and the way I look at it is about building myself in my own power so that I can manage and deal with the hate and the violence that's out there. That I actually have to find my allies, find the other communities that are going through the same thing, and that we actually can stand, again, I say it a second time, but it's about us standing in our power. And that our response to this narrative and to this wave of violence, instead of looking at it and trying to respond to something that's completely irrational, because a lot of it is actually based on fear, absolute fear. Therefore, if we're trying to, and it's all feelings and emotions, people are not responding to facts anymore, so I can actually go and say, but did you know that migrants actually really contribute to the economy? And did you know that by not actually injuring people, you know, so there's all these facts and myth busting and all that doesn't work anymore on people, one side or another. It kind of almost polarizes people. And I think because we're now talking about feelings and emotions, so how am I going to respond to the fear of people that are voting for people that are advocating for hate by giving them numbers? No. So as long as, so there's a whole journey so instead of me trying to respond to the fears of that space, I probably should respond to the fear of my community and people that are actually hurt and in pain due to that level of violence and hatred. So how do we build ourselves? What does real solidarity look like? What does us actually knowing each other, and not just by, you know, like in the last couple of years, I've learned in the hard way that I thought I was in solidarity with people until I got to actually stand with them. So the example I would have would be that it's only in the last couple of years that I got to actually work with trans activists, for example. So for years I thought I was in solidarity with the trans community. I was convinced I have your back and I would stand with you, until I actually got to work with the trans community and I realized how solidarity looked for them and what was needed from me as an ally. So, and that was a really humbling experience, and kind of just realizing that it's not as simple as that, that if we want to stand in solidarity, there's a lot of intra-community work that we need to do ourselves. And instead of spending energy trying to convince people that have chosen violence as their way of expressing their fear, instead of wasting that energy, I would see it as not wasting energy, but actually maybe using that same energy that we would have used trying to respond to their fears rationally, with maybe using it in our own communities, and not just necessarily communities, but generally the kind of society that we want, really spending time maybe exploring and understanding the values that we say we stand for. So if you stand for respect and you stand for equity and you stand for equality and justice, what does it really look like? What does it mean? And how do you live your values, and how do you work with others around those values? So yeah, 2019 going to be a really interesting year, and maybe it is about us trying to really stand in our power.